Hey guys, it's me, your friendly neighborhood Afro Hamurai, and today I'm going to walk you through doing some customization of the TR-6S by way of going into its settings and changing its settings, and most importantly, saving the settings. That's very important. I'm on my dining table again because this is pretty much where I do all my music stuff, for I do not have a desk. But let's get straight into it anyway. So yeah, the TR-6S's settings are all within this utility button. So if you hit utility, you'll get into all of the settings of the TR-6S itself, not necessarily any of the individual instruments. You get through that by holding like shift and instrument while you tap something. If you want me to do a video about that, tell me, I'll do one. But like generally speaking, once you know how to set these up, you know how to change all the other settings. But I digress. This is where you have all the settings for the TR-6S. You go through them with the value knob. I don't have three hands, which is a shame, because if I did, I would hold down shift and then turn that, and it would change what different like category you're in at the top. So at the moment we're in general. If I was holding shift and scrolling, it would then scroll really quickly to things like reload, to the sample options, to the LED options, and so on and so forth. But yeah, we're going to go back, and basically I'm going to scroll through, and when I get to an interesting one, I'm going to stop and talk about it. There we go, knob mode. So there's a few options you have here by way of two for knob mode, which is direct and catch. Direct kind of works a bit like the Minilog XD I have. So if you have any other like analog synthesizers or even digital synthesizers that use knobs like this to change everything, like little rotary knobs, that's kind of going to be what you'd expect it to do, which is that if you have a kit that you load, so if for example I was to load the 909 kit instead of the 808 kit, all of the parameters like tune, decay, and control, or whatever's mapped on that, as well as the reverb and the delay and the master effects, they're all going to be set onto default values. Direct knob mode means that the moment I move the knob, so if for example the default mode was like in the middle, if I were to then move the knob on delay or decay, that would then force that to be whatever that new value is. The alternative is catch, which is a bit different. So essentially with catch, if that default was in the middle at the top, I would have to firstly move the knob to the middle and then go past it. So either go past it forward or go past it backward. And what that happens is that this will keep going until it catches the original value, and then it will start changing the value for you. So catch is cool if you want to have a bit of a smoother change to your parameters without any of that jerky change in delay speed or any of that jerky change in tune. For me, especially when it comes to editing things and when I put in things like motion and so on, I prefer the direct option, which is from memory the default. So the start pattern and the start kit, I have these set to last, which isn't the default. And essentially what this is when you turn the TR-6S on, this tells it what pattern to turn on to, and then this tells it what kit to turn on to. So if I wanted to, I could say, oh, start on pattern, like, you know, if I wanted to have a custom one, like I could tell it to start on pattern 601 every time I start up, and then to work with the last kit that I saved. I prefer having it set on last, because that at very least means that if I turn the TR-6S off after I've finished working on a pattern and I've saved the pattern, I still get to go back onto that pattern, and I don't have to start looking through and finding where it is. So if you're using this a bit more as like a project worker, then last might be quite cool. The only reason I'd really say that you'd want to set it off of last is, yet again, if you have a specific performance that you're saving to and writing to that you want to make sure it always goes back to, especially if maybe someone else is using it and you just want to make sure it keeps on the pattern that you liked, you can set it there. Otherwise, yeah, just last is my favorite one. This isn't the default, so if you want it like this, you need to go in and actually change it. Now let's go into some of the cool ones that I already talked about in my setting up your TR-6S with your DAW video, but I'll just go through it again. The tempo sync options are either auto, USB, or internal, or MIDI. I would just say leave it on auto. Essentially, it means that if the TR-6S receives MIDI through the MIDI port, it will listen to that. If it doesn't have anything plugged into MIDI in, it will listen to the USB. If it doesn't have any MIDI coming in from MIDI or USB by way of like MIDI clock, it will just use its internal tempo. The only reason I would maybe go in and mess with this is if I had this connected into a computer and then also into MIDI for MIDI control instead, and I couldn't set it to not send sync out, then maybe I would go in and mess with it. But I wouldn't necessarily have it set to anything permanently, more on a per session basis. On the topic of MIDI, the TR-6S can be used as a MIDI sound module with computers, and I think technically if you had this connected in to something that's able to send MIDI notes to it and you told it to listen to it, it would as well. Essentially, you can set this up to trigger the sounds using MIDI. This is really useful if you want to use it with a DAW as something for music production, and if you want to, trigger notes with your keyboard or sequence on your computer so that you can do some things with like odd time signatures. Like if you wanted to have tracks in something like, I don't know, 7/4 or, other weird time signatures like that, you could instead program it using a computer. The gotcha is that I've set mine up correctly, but the default notes that are set up with the TR-6S just make, I'm just going to straight up say it, almost completely no sense. It almost seems like the standard notes for the TR-6S are basically the standard notes for the TR-8S, but they just took the 8's tracks away and just put the 6's there, but didn't really squish them together. I remember that the standard was like the kick was on C2, but then something else was actually on C3, when there's no need for having like 12 actual notes of like difference. Something else was like in the second octave and also on a completely separate key for no reason. So this is actually worth going through and messing with. I will put a list of what my notes are in the description below, and generally I find that tends to work the easiest for me and tends to at least be the friendliest for when you're using any other sort of sequences that are built into your DAW, or if you're just writing MIDI. It helps to just make it a lot less confusing. And the most important thing, utility backup, which I haven't done in a while, so I'm going to do that now. I'm just going to make a backup right now. And essentially what that does is it will let you back up the entire TR-6S. I don't believe it backs up the samples individually, but it does back up what samples you've used. So if you ever have any sort of issue with the TR-6S system, like if you ever have any sort of corruption, you want to make sure that you back it up. That backs up onto the SD card that's in the TR-6S. So I would suggest you get an SD card for it just to make sure that your patterns and stuff are backed up. I do a backup every so often just to make sure that I still keep all of my information. And most importantly, if you are backing up like I am right now, you want to make sure that you're either using batteries that have quite a lot of juice in them, because as you can see, it's taking a little bit of time, or you'll want to have it connected by USB, because that will then use USB bus power, so you could plug it into a computer or plug it into a power bank or something, and that will at least mean that you don't run out of battery while it's backing up. And even more importantly than backing up your TR-6S is making sure that you actually save all of your settings that you've just made. The way that you save is that you use Shift and Exit, which means I'm going to have to let go of my microphone real quick and do a bit of a cut. And when you press Shift and Exit, you're going to be in the right menu. And you'll see that Overwrite has a star next to it, Pattern doesn't, Kit has a star next to it, and System has a star next to it. Essentially anything that has a star means that there has been a change and that you would need to save it. So for example, System having a star means that I've changed some of my system settings from what they were before, and it's telling me, hey, you need to save this, or when you turn your TR-6S off, it isn't going to remember it. Overwrite will actually write over your pattern and your kit. Pattern will write your pattern, kit will write your kit, When you select to write the kit, it will ask you where you want to send it to, the same as your patterns. So if, for example, you started with the 808 kit and you really liked it, you made some changes and you want to keep those changes, but you don't want to overwrite the factory default TR-808 kit, you can put it onto an option. I think it's after, I think anything after 69. Yeah, so anything 69 and onwards, I already saved something in here, but anything 69 or onwards in terms of kit is your custom kits. I know it's funny because I said 69, just there you go, fine, right? Look, they're custom kits. You save your custom kit in here. If you match this up with then also having your TR-6S start up to your last kit, when you turn your TR-6S off after you've saved your kit, it then loads into your custom kit, so you don't need to put any of your customizations in again, which is pretty cool. Overwrite will do both your pattern and your kit, but it won't let you choose where it goes. So if I were to click overwrite now, which I'm not going to, it would overwrite the kit regardless of where I want it saved. So it would overwrite the kit one that I have, and it would also overwrite the pattern. So if I edited one of the factory default patterns, that factory default pattern would then be a pattern that I have. But yeah, just to come back onto it, you'll want to make sure that when you do make any changes to the system settings that you go into write, so by pressing shift and exit so that it uses the write function that's underneath it, and you'll want to write the system. And you want to do that before you turn your TR-6S off. Backing up doesn't write your system. Writing your system writes your system. Afterwards, you might then want to do another backup of it. Now, I haven't actually made any real changes, so I'm just going to turn my TR-6S off. So then that way it doesn't save anything I've accidentally done. But I hope that you've found this video useful. If you have, you can like it if you want. You can subscribe if you want to as well. That would be pretty cool. I do some music where I use the TR-6S. That's all on my channel under the dining table sessions. The only one where I don't use the TR-6S is on my most recent one. I'll have like a link for that in the description below, and I'll most probably have a link to the playlist up there as well. But yeah, enjoy your day and all that. Cool.